blah 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 blah. Ah, yes, that's the microphone working. To blah 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 blah. No, of course no one would watch that. That would be ridiculous. Hi, Togglebit. Yes, you're totally not watching. I'll be back in a second. I mean, I said excellent, but it doesn't really matter. Hey, we're constructor. Yes, 9 a.m. It's going to be 9 a.m., isn't it? I'm just going to move this microphone real quick. Okay. Somewhere around there. That still doesn't look loud enough. Oh well, I'm sure it'll be okay. Okay, and then the next thing to do is to go through all the self-promotion required to run a stream, which is interesting to say the least. What are we doing today? I mean, yeah, recall singularity. Another day, another stream. Today we are binding inputs. To a player on the screen, a player model on the screen. Yeah. Join us on Twitch. And then I need to put a link here to my tweet. Okay. And then I need to go into watch people code. Let's have a look at my posts for that. I'm kind of deliberately putting them on the which way do I point? Putting them on the other screen there because I kind of felt like it was a bit weird to watch me do that. I really should have like a splash screen that has a big countdown timer and it's all very exciting and it's a fade out and plays theme music or something. You can imagine how this like gets a bit crazy over time. Okay. I need to put a post on Watch People Code. I was just wondering what post has done the best for titles. I guess I might as well share this. So Watch People Code. This one yesterday, Fix Physics Gliders, it got no votes. It got downvoted once the stream was offline. Rust Game Dev was pretty good. But I think Rust Game Dev is probably the best way to lead that one. So this is Rust Game Dev and we're doing okay, so let's make a new post to where am I posting to? I seem to be posting to my own profile. This is a problem I've had before. Okay. So watch people code, post, what's the title? Rust Game Dev. PRS, moving person interacting with items with console, perhaps flying. And it's going to be a link and the URL is Twitch and we'll post that. Yes, have a look at my own stream. So I've got 3 people, that probably includes me. I find it kind of spooky to watch myself, so I'm just close that for now. Yeah. Okay, so what shall I do next? Oh, that's probably enough promotion. Got that running. So I just need to mention in the Discord that I'm just starting now, and then we'll just discuss. Don't switch. Streaming. Can't watch the stream. What if I should put it in the... put it in the Factoria server. I wonder if they'll get angry at me. I hope they won't. We'll see. I wish I could get rid of this little profile. I need to create a profile picture and so on for my profile. Whenever I go ahead and post myself online, it comes up with this green face thing. I need a pretty picture, myself smiling with a guitar, or ships flying through space, or something like that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I have the tea. I believe it's probably time to start. So let's just do that, even though it's a bit early. So first up, I'm Tom Lees. I'm the maker of the Recall Singularity, which is a space game in space in which you build factories in spaceships, which is what you tend to find in space. You may also be able to build them on the surface of asteroids and so on. I'm coding it up in Rust. I'm using Godot as a renderer, and I have a compile issue. So like a lot of these things, we're going to start with a very exciting hunt for all the compilation problems, and then I'll give you a quick demo of my game. The goal for tonight, the primary one, is that at the end of last time we were programming, and nothing interesting has happened in the project since then, after that we were able to move a person around on multiple clients at the same time, but you couldn't see the person. You just knew they were there because they were on a console. We're going to pass that into Godot. I'm still trying to decide between whether I want to move the little person model in Rust code, or if I want to move the little person model in Godot code. I'm very heavily leaning towards the Godot side of things, using GD script to actually move the model, because it sounds to me like that would make things like particle effects and sound effects and animation and stuff a lot easier from Rust. So that's where I'm at. So the first thing to do is fix that compilation issue you just briefly saw. So if we run the server, it pops up with this over here. So what you can see here is just some simple compilation issues from last time. Unexpected close delimiter. Okay, so we've got some issues here where I was clicking and dragging at some point, and in the process of clicking and dragging I damaged that code. Oh, that's not the right repository. This repository. I'm just reading this comment. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to manage all the stuff that's kind of game related that you could imagine being a simplified game. All of that's going to be in Rust. Everything that could possibly be described as an effect for the player's benefit is going to be in GD script. It's kind of the rule I'm going to follow. This tea, by the way, is just regular gumboot tea. It's like that's what we call the red tea. I don't know what you say. Regular English tea. What do you call that stuff that just has all the weird leaves mixed together? Oh, I've got the wrong lighting on. Hold on. There we go. Moody white lighting from one side. It just looks so much better on camera. Excellent. We can tell that we're serious now. Serious lighting. Translating the entire code into Rust. Yeah. Sorry about the creaking of the microphone here. I'm not sure if that's beneficial myself, Adwani, or I'm worried about moving this microphone too much and like making lots of loud noise on your end. Hold on. So the goal here is to get the microphone on axis with my voice, because it's very sensitive. I've done some testing and it's very sensitive. I need to speak straight at the microphone for it to work properly and get a nice clear signal for you, so everything is nice and loud. But it's kind of blocking my screen, so I'm only using Godot because it's an edit and nothing else. That's actually quite sensible, Adwani. I can't argue with that. But the advantage of GDScript is that it's very fast to develop, has a nice little debugger, is easier for artists to understand if I ask them to replace my players later, and is reloaded much more quickly than Rust, which requires a recompilation. So those effects together make me think I should do some stuff in GDScript. Yeah, I'm fiddling with this microphone a lot today. That time I don't do it loud. Hopefully it doesn't bother you too much. Okay. Creek. So the problem was compilation. The problem was in system move biped. I believe I know. I don't seem to have got a version of it before. I corrupted it just now. Move biped system. It's almost like I've lost all my work in it, which is a real pity, because we had that all working yesterday. And now that's gone. I wonder if I can undo changes here, like if I've had to see if it remembers the previous versions. This is me pushing FZ, Control Z. Yeah, so it does still remember the version before it got corrupted. So that's good. Okay. Fine. I need to commit my changes before we get a problem. I probably can compile now. Excuse me, I have to open this window. There you go. Now you guys can enjoy the delighting sounds of the night sky. And I can enjoy moths as they're coming through the window. That'll be good. But yeah, the aircon is out in the main house, and once I close the door, streaming mode on, I get no more cold air, so it gets really hot in here, which is kind of annoying. And the normal options, as proposed by Songs, don't make sense when you're on stream. Yeah. TMI, Tom, TMI. There's that wonderful diagram again. I'm glad you guys like ASCII out so much. Okay. So that compiled and it ran, and here's a server running, and here's the game running. So this game is now joining. I've set up the game so that it has debug output that shows where the player is being moved, and how we can move a little model on the screen. On a more personal note, it's been interesting trying to do a stream every night and stay up actually quite late for me. It's quite tiring, and the tasks that I work on are different than I'd probably work on by myself. But the benefit of streaming, I've found, is it keeps me on task a lot. Which is definitely of benefit. Okay, so this I don't think this world is actually synchronizing full build. I think something funny is going on here. Yeah. So we'll just try doing all this again. So I like the idea of streaming at the same time every day, probably having a schedule of some kind. But it has a cost as well. So we'll just see how that works out. At some point soon, we probably want to diverge off into other tasks rather than programming so much. Here's a game with its biped position. So if I move the cursors, you can see that this is rotating the player in the console. Nothing's happening here. So the one that you see here is like a client-side version of the player. and you can move him with the cursor keys, but it doesn't respect the facing of the player when moving. So no matter which way I move it, the facing's on axis. So in this game, you've got spaceships and factories. We can build floors like so to extend the area of the ship. You can build, say, for instance, a scoop and some conveyors, and at the moment the scoop is always creating gold, and there's a refinery that automatically refines gold, and you can drive that gold into a container. It comes out as gold and slag. Later on we'll be able to separate those, put them into a container, which is currently this yellow mesh. I need to make it less ugly. It's, you know, it's like a placeholder, but it's been in the game for a while now. It's almost a signatory ugly yellow box. It's going to look kind of weird when that's finally actually fixed. I have to do that at some point. So that's the game as it stands. If I hover over one of these things, like this box, I should see that it's got slag and gold in it. You can see in the writing that's in the... I can't move the cursor to show you, but you can see that the amount of slag and gold is changing every time I move my cursor over it. And that updates what's being written. Okay, so the first task is to take these numbers that are being output on the screen there and tell Godot where to place the human. Yeah, let me put this tea bag in the bin. Now, the human's going to be a child in the century of the ship itself. We're going to want it to be in the right place. It's not certain if we want to make it its own node. I'm not sure what events I want to put out, or if I want to just reach inside the sector and copy it every frame. So let's just go with the simplest option, which is that I use a statically named node of some kind. I guess I have to hold a reference to it. I'm not sure I can hold a reference long term to the path of a node. I can do it in script, but I don't think I can do it in Rust reliably. Yeah. Let's see. So modules, production module. So in my code, SG core is the binding between the simulation and Godot. Down here we have SGNet for the networking. We have SG simulation, which is where most of the logic for the sim resides. It's kind of like a turn-based game. And so we're going to have to, in Star World Link is the main link between the spaceship and Godot, so that would be a natural place to put anything that links the two. But I also wonder if I want to make a script of some kind to manage the player. So if we fire up Godot, have a look at the game, which is just launched on this other screen here. Here we go. The background here is for lighting reasons, and there's a hidden space background. In case you're wondering, camera goes this way. So that's how the scene works real quick. So we've got a scene tree here, and inside ships we create subships. We could tell the subship that it has a player inside it and where the player is, and let it create and manage those. Because what I'm imagining is the little player moves off one ship, walks off one ship, and then walks onto a different ship. So there's a switchover point where now the player is controlled by a different ship. It would be nice if we could move that node across. I kind of want it to be parented in correctly. I guess a sector could somehow store a node path. I wonder if what means we have to store paths to nodes in Godot Rust. So look at our trusty documentation, and we'll go to GD native. Is it called GD native in here? Yep. and we'll have a look at the structs available. Question I'm asking myself, is there a node path in here? Because I think that's what it's called. You can reference a node and so on. It's a reference counter, which means it will last. So this is the concept of a particular player. And it's what you get if you use get node. So if you move a node to a different location so it has a different parent, does it mean that it gets lost? Because what I'm thinking of, what happens if I move the player from one part of the scene tree to a different part? Does that make the previous node path invalid? So there's get child, which is something which nodes have. As far as I understand, that returns another node. I see. So we provide a node path and it returns a node. And these are non-reference counted, so it's unsafe. So node path is more safe. So I'm wondering if there's a way to store a reference to a node no matter where it goes. Oh well. So every one of the entities that exists within specs. Yeah, hold on. I'm just starting to come up with an idea. I wonder if it's possible to abuse specs a little bit here. We've got a specs world, and in that specs world where we've got all sorts of data, I wonder if I can make data from the Godot bindings in Rust here and put it into the specs world, and then that's used to track the entities. Because I can always register a component later. And that means that I can put things in that the simulation doesn't know about, including Godot data. It's not something I considered before. So you know how here the world, we register all these different entities. So in Star World Link, we get told whenever a new world is created, we could reach into that world and we could actually add more data to it. That would make an interesting experiment. Okay, so that's an approach I think I might try, because in some ways that's quite elegant. It's an elegant solution to the problem of trying to map Godot binding specific data to particular entities in the game world. We can just create a specs component inside of the SG core module, and we can register it when the world's created. And that means that I don't have to try and maintain a binding between these two in an abstract sense, and that'll make life easier. So let's hack that up real quick. So I like to rotate the chair sideways sometimes, but when it's time for serious coding, one has to limber up, get the chair in the right position, and off we go. Okay, so very first thing to do is make sure that all the code is ship shape, committed, locked in, all those good things. So this is all the work we did last time. There's a lot of tidying up. We created this idea of a biped, which is going to be the player. We moved ship movement stuff into systems, a system to move bipeds, physics, some of the code which was in physics before was moved into systems as well. space had the biped component added and a new helper to make them. I think, I can't remember if I pushed my changes to we had to change one of the submodules. I believe it was specs physics needed to fix. Okay, I have fixed that, but I never pushed it, so I'll push it, and I'm not pushing it to origin. Was origin Tom? I think my origin is already set up to be me. Yeah, I was pushing to my version of specs physics, not the public version. I could create a pull request. Basically, I found a problem in the specs physics binding where you couldn't change a collider, and I created a patch. This thinking thingy. Yes, what's this pausing, stopping to think and plan? Who would do that? Okay, so I like to look at this. I find it very comforting. I don't think I actually pushed the commit button. I find it very comforting to see that everything is committed, and I can break the code at my leisure. Control players, not ships with keys. I think that part of being a 9,000 times programmer is typing something like use mod specs physics. That's how one becomes a 9,000 times programmer. You completely avoid a problem. The problem with that is that no one can tell because they just go, you just used the library, but it was a decision to use the library where you saved the time. Okay. But thank you, that was a very humorous comment, I appreciate. I'd like to welcome my new admins to the Discord team. Weird Constructor is an admin, and I've also got Iron, I can't remember his last part of his name, Iron Cartographer, both now admins of my Discord channel, the Recall Singularity Discord. Thank you, Ardawani. I think you need to be a bit of a typist to be a good programmer, otherwise you will write very short emails describing why people should do what you say, and they won't do what you say, and then everyone does what someone else said, and then you get sad. But, wow, there's so much talking today. Yeah. Often I find the hardest part is getting something on the page. It's really hard to just get started. It's really hard to just keep making forward progress. Okay, so the plan is we're going to create something in here that's going to manage players. Helper, source. What should we call this? It's not a generator, because it's not part of procedural generation. It's not really a helper. It's more of a binding between, it's more part of a bridge, I guess, but it's not going to be a GD class, which is what I'm usually using the word bridge for. So it's something else. I'm not sure what I'm going to call that. Let's just call it components, because these are literally going to be components. Okay, so we're going to create a new components mod rs add. So this component, we'll just look at biped for a reference. So it's very similar to the biped class. Has a component, has a biped. Do we need to game sterilize? I don't think we do. But I'll put one in anyway. So this class is just going to remember enough information to move a walking character around. GD walkable. GD for Godot, walkable, right? This is a guy who walks around on the screen. The most interesting thing I know is node. It's a node path. Did I get that name right? Because that's where we'll find the node that represents this guy. I don't know what else here is important right now, so we'll get rid of that. Implement component for GD walkable. Cool. Did I must have specs, otherwise you can't use it, so that's not a problem. So implement GD walkable, the new takes, so node path is a, yeah. So the idea is that when each frame, if we're tracking it in Godot, we'll have a GD walkable on it, and we'll have whatever data we think is necessary to track it. GD walkable path. And this could be part of a new and exciting way of managing the UI. Because one refactor I did recently on stream, but it's earlier this week, it feels like a long time ago now, was to move the sector which contains the specs worlds, to move that sector, I'm just going to call this path, not node, it's confusing, into being owned by GD Star World Link. Before then, it was maintained by a network of threads, so you didn't really want to lock it and update. Wow, this whole approach is starting to turn the gears in my mind, because I've always been thinking of spec systems being something that only ran in the simulation, but we could start running systems that don't modify the sim here. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of parts of me that are really nervous about modifying the lockstep sim for Godot reasons. I'm going to have to like figure out how I enforce that. I'm not going to bother implementing game map serialize, which is a way of creating a Godot dictionary from one of my objects so that I can get it into Godot. I don't need to do that right here. Okay, so we've got a class called GD Walkable. Close others. I'm going to open Star World Link and put it on the other side. Close others. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create some class in here. So I created GD Walkable here. So we need to create a system that will move the player to the right place. The easiest way to move the player to the right place is just to grab the node and move it. Yeah. Wonder if I know these ship links. These ship link nodes. Do we even know the paths to those from Star World Link? I think I had a particular naming convention where it made children with a certain name. So if I go back to Godot and I click on run, and I'm just going to run the server because I don't think the server is currently running. So that's the server running, and then so that game is running now. If I go across to here, I click on this button here saying remote, we can now see the scene tree that is being created by the player. And this scene tree contains a node called ships. We've got ship 1 and ship 2. So if we looked here, there's ship 1 is over here, ship 2 is over here. So if I grab ship 1 and I start moving its Y location, it doesn't do anything. That's very interesting. I was expecting to see it float around. I guess not. Maybe because every frame is getting changed. If we change the scale, no, that's not being applied. Oh, we're writing the entire transform. We can make it invisible. There we go. So you can see how it's flashing in and out of visibility. Rust every frame is changing its data, which is why we can't see it changing. So what we're going to do is put the little player inside this list of nodes here. I'm wondering if I want to grab it from use the correct ship and pull it in. That might be the easiest way to understand what's going on, is if the correct ship pulls it in. Let's see, let's have a quick look at this. So that then raises another possibility, which is that we could, so I've got this mod here. So when I say the correct ship pulls it in, I mean that this ship 1 and ship 2, these two are actually embodied by Rust classes. This ship link class is actually the script for those nodes. So I'm wondering if I want to write the code that moves the player into this, or I want to write it into the Star World link. When a ship is moved, Edit floor. Module. Where did I move the ship? So first we get the sector, then we get the world, then we get the module at. No, it's the ship link. I want to look at the Star World link. Physics process. I'm just looking at how ships are moved from Rust to remind myself how I find the ship in the nodes. Okay, update ships. So we get the whole sector, we get the world, we get their positions, we go through each one and find the key. There we are, that's the key string. So we find the keys to the ships. Interesting. There's a whole lot of concepts here that need some refining. But given we know a ship's child world ID, we can find it. So then the next thing we do is we find the ship spatial node from the key string. And if we find the ship, then we start moving it. But this block of code here, that block is something reusable. So we could, I wonder if we can expand, take a function. No, it won't let me take that as a function. So we're going to create a function of our own. Does it go in this class? We have to get it from owner. Wonder if I need a class here that finds a ship by ID. Might as well put it here. Function get ship spatial. It needs a self. Well, I don't know if we need a self actually. No. Doesn't even need a ship. It just needs a child world ID. So it's actually a static function. So what we need is ship's parent, right, which is going to be a GD native spatial, and then we also need number, which is this U32. We're going to say local world ID, so world ID. I believe child world 0 is a global ID. I'm just creating a routine that I can call that's going to give me a reference to the node that contains a ship. So to get a ship spatial, we need its parent and its ID. So we call this ship ID, and then the code we need is this block basically. So we've got a key string. So that comes from the ship ID, and it specifies the name of the node, and then in an unsafe block we need the ship spatial to find the node and cast it to spatial. It might be, it's an option, so it returns an option spatial. What do we call it? I think there's a GD native. Yes, there's a GD native before this. Like so. Okay, so if we've got a get ship spatial, we can say let the key string. So do we even need the key string anymore? No. So we could say let ship spatial equal and all that. Get ship spatial owner ship. Well, I need to remember this. It's ship.childWorld. Ship.childWorld. So that refactor shouldn't have done anything other than move this into its own routine. Why is that orange? I put a semicolon here. Okay. And the reason why we did that exercise is because we need to use a similar get ship spatial further on to move stuff. I assume the octopus is a complement? Hopefully, tentacular coding. We shall see. If we've got a spatial, then we're going to update it. So one thing I'm wondering about is whether I want to move this logic into a system of its own or something similar. I mean, it definitely could be in a routine called transform ships, move ships. Own a world. Okay. This owner is still the GD native spatial. This world, well, we'd like it to be actually a world. So we're going to pass world.confirmed in here. Okay, and then this next part is to move bipeds. Move bipeds. Move bipeds. So we've got move ships, move bipeds. Move bipeds also takes an owner, like so, which is the node that contains all the ships. It's the one which the script is attached to. This lock world concept, I thought I made that public, but I haven't. Import? Oh, I have. Okay, good. Thanks, Weird Constructor. That's cool. Tentacles to help. Yes, I need some extra tentacles. I'm just going to quickly close Godot down. I didn't do anything that's worth saving, so great. Windows really wants to make this full screen app. I don't want that because then you guys can't see the bottom and I forget. Move bipeds. I'm just processing information here. Okay, so we need to know where the biped used to be. So, we're going to go back up here to where a new ship has been added. Process. If star event is none, set up the star events. If, interesting. While there is an event, if a ship was added, we're going to go in and look at it. How? Set world ID. Hold on. I'm just trying to figure out to myself how I want to solve this problem of a callback function that one calls whenever a world is created. And it sounds like the best way to solve it is to create an optional function once whenever a world is created inside of sector. This is a place where we can tell the sector what we want to add. So we're going to have a quick look at sector, which is kind of like our parent to everything. We're going to modify this. So this add world function, well not add world, this is actually only for tests. So let's just put there's a define you can put in front of test code. We only want that function available in tests because it's currently only used in tests, and I don't want to maintain it. So I'm just going to put config test there to remind me that this function only has to work in tests. So there's a function down here called get or create world that actually makes worlds, and here it makes spaceships or production floors. I want a way to tell these classes what extra things I want registered when those worlds get created, and the natural way to do that is to add a function once. Did I make world wrap type public? Yeah. Okay. Great. So in sector, this is once again my universe. On the client, I want to have a callback where I can add stuff to the world that's just been created. This is a specs world I'm talking about here. So new world callback, and it's going to be an option. I need to figure out how to make a dynamic pointer to. There's an option, and it's dynamic, and it's to a function that takes world, and it takes a mutable reference to a world. So and returns nothing. I wonder if that's going to just work. Seems highly unlikely. What did I get wrong? Okay, so an FN mute. Wonderful. If that's the answer, toggle bit, you probably just save a bunch of time. I'm going to look at FN mute and great, it's an FN mute. I won't say that again. Docs. So I'm just running rust up docs, which runs a local version of the documentation from your own hard drive, which is very useful. Also gives up my username and points out that I'm on Windows. That's probably a really great thing to put on stream. Let's look up this class FN mute. It's a version of the call operator that takes a mutable receiver. They will mutate state. See, this is a template. So this function, this is templated based on what the if's type is. I would rather use a dynamic binding. So we can put an if. Okay. You're right, Togglebit. I'm already leaking all the information. All the possible if information. So I want a dynamic FN mute, and the type that the FN mute takes is of world. And then that means it's a function that takes a mutable pointer to a world. I probably need to put a box inside the option as well. We're going to find out if that's a problem when we try and compile. So I think calling out a new world callback is fine. One thing that I want to put in here though as well is not just this world, but also the type. I don't really want the type to be mutable. I just wanted to give it some more information to go on. Yeah. Or we could always say that there's a new floor callback and a new space. The space callback isn't really so relevant because we only do that one time at the moment. These are two functions that get called for the two kinds of new worlds we create. So if we have a look down here, when we create a world, it's either going to be a spaceship world or it's going to be a production floor world. So we create this new world. You know, I was thinking to myself, does it even matter? Yes. So the only one we need to call back for really is any floor one. We'll just call the new world callback for any one of those. So, get or create world. That's probably all babble that makes perfect sense to you. I'm sure the thing I said could possibly be confusing, because blah blah. New world. I want to only call it if there is something. I think you just call map, though I don't care what the result is. So probably just to call map anyway. So if the option has a callback, we're going to call it now, right? I think so. If, and we're going to call if. We're going to pass the world new world, and we're passing a mutable reference to the new world, like so. Done. So new world callback, if set, should get called here. Okay, so then we need to register a callback, world back, and it needs to have a mutable self, and needs to take a fn mute, same type as the other one. So it needs to be a dynamic fn mute, taking an argument of type world, and we're going to set self dot new world callback equal to some callback. So that means that whoever creates a sector can specify some callback that gets called. So we're going to say I need a box, right? Yeah, it's not sized, so I need to put a box around this. So all dynamic variables are not sized. So this way I don't have to specify at compile time which type this is exactly, because in Rust every single possible pointer to a function has a different type. Wherever like if I declare two functions that take the same arguments but they're declared in two different places, they technically have two different types. So I need to use a dynamic version of the function mute for this to work. And then once you make a dynamic version, you need to put it inside a box. It's just the way that Rust doesn't really handle pointers directly. It handles them through another class in the middle, like a box. Or a vector or something similar. Not an expert on that. You read up on it if you're confused. Okay. So in Ready, when we first create this guy, we want to pass someone who knows how to build this stuff. So I'm going to create a function in mod that is going to know how to register our components. So we've got a pub function register gd world components. Not shying away from the long names of this one. And it takes a world which is a mutable world, which this function doesn't know about, and in particular we want to use world dot register, and it's going to register the GD walkable class, and that way we know that there will be a storage sitting inside of that world ready to store our class when we should need it. This little world extension needs to be imported in order to use register, which is like most things that worlds use need this world extension class. Okay, and then we need to set this up from inside our style world link. So we got start client. And then somewhere in here with the Star World link we actually get the singleton for the first time. It's probably in start client that we do this. Build static sector set master. So we could say that the start client returns a pointer to the sector. Yeah, the sector's already in a mutex, so we need to grab it from the mutex again in order to use it. So let's just have a look up here in Ready. So we start the client, and then straight afterwards we can get the sector, and we can do various things with the sector. The one thing we want to do, well, two things, is we want to tell the sector that it needs to register a world callback, which is going to be the register GD world components function, like so. And I believe we need to put that into a box, like so. Oh well, it's going to blow up soon if it doesn't work. And get or create world, and we're going to use the space world ID. So now we've got the space world. Let space world equal this. Hold on. Okay, so I just realized that so we've got the register GD world components. We want to register GD floor components here, which are the ones that are done per ship. We want to register the GD star components. They'll be the ones that are done once for all the ships in that so you remember there's a global world that contains the ships, and there's a floor world that contains the modules within each spaceship, which is in this one. We only need to register this GD walkable with the pawn, and the pawn's currently in the star system 1, so that's where we want the GD walkable to be. This stuff's probably just like a prelude to my plans, so right now it might not make a huge amount of sense. It hopefully will start making more sense in a minute. So in ready, space world is equal to get the space world, and unfortunately that's a world sync, so to get the actual world we have to go, we're going to call register GD star components. We're going to pass it space world dot let me just go to the world sync, and it's called lock world, I believe. Get lock world mute. So space world dot get lock world mute dot confirmed mute, and that will allow us to change that world to register the component. There's so much here that's hacky. There's so much here that's me breaking down some of the structures that I wanted to do. In particular, I wanted to keep these worlds completely isolated from the outside world, but more and more I'm binding tightly against my Godot code here. This can't go on forever. At some point I probably need to refactor this, but we're just going to stick with it for now. Hopefully the refactoring is really obvious. For instance, this confirmed mute, I can search for that string, find all the places I'm doing it, and go, you're really bad. We need to remove you. Okay. Okay. That's great. So we've got the GD walkable component registered. So if we go back into the ship link, we're going to think to ourselves, if you have a GD world, this walkable component, if you have one of those, then we know where to find you. We need to move you. If you don't have one of those, you need to add you to the correct world, the correct place. So we need to move bipedals. And we don't just need bipeds. We also need this other thing, which is GD walkables. So for biped and GD walkable, and the GD walkable is here, and it's right storage GD GD walkable. And I'm wondering if I want to add to the join. I probably don't. So we've got the biped, and now we want to say let walkable equal GD walkable. Put an S here to say it's a set. GD walkables dot get mute. We're going to get a biped It's not the biped we want. Yeah, we're going to use a join. Maybe, no, we need an entity. So we want all the entities. That way we'll know. If we have an entity reference, we can add a component. So the first time we try and access a biped, we're not going to have any component on it that's the GD walkable. That means we know it's new, so we need to add it to the client. So we're going to need an entities res, as it's called. I think it's called entities rather than entities res, actually. Okay, so using GD walkables, get mute entity, and that will clone the entity because it's just basically a pair of integers. So if there is some walkable, that's some walkable. Then the next question is the current walkable in the right ship? So a very quick way of doing that test would be to actually ask it what ship it's in. So let's add a ship. If we go to the biped, we can see it's got a particular name for the ship. It's called Child World. So we're going to say Child World here as well. And that will be a... So if these child worlds don't match, then that means we have to move the pawn from one world to the other. So if there is some pawn, then if they've got the same child world, so if GD walkable dot child world is equal to biped dot child world, if those two things are the same, then we just need to move it. Just need to move the player down here. We need to put it in the correct ship. So let's probably don't need to have an else, because we're going to move the player in both cases. And if we're going to move the player in every case, we're always going to end up with a GD walkable at the end of the day. Yeah. I don't think I have a scene in Godot which is a sub-scene for a player. I think I just specifically created a pawn in the past. So if we have a look in here and we have a look at this, nope, there doesn't seem to be a player on this. Well, there is actually. Right in the middle here, there's a little player pawn. Where is he? Player. And he even has a script, because at the moment I have the there's like things like set existent parent, walk to, interact with, process a movement, has move directions. This is all code we're going to want to port later. There's this player node. So whatever reference this is, it stays valid as you move around, which is really useful. I don't know why that stays valid. In this GT script here. So that's not what we want. He's a sub scene, just a player in a cube. So if we look at it in 3D, he's just a little dude. There he is. And it's called cube because in Blender I never bothered to rename the node from the default cube. When I created him, I just extruded a cube a whole bunch of times. It's not particularly hard to do. I think I've just crashed Godot. Happens occasionally. I wonder if it's something to do with the model type I'm using. It's somewhat annoying. Fortunately, we didn't lose any work. But it does leave me wondering what the name of that sub-scene was, because that was kind of what I was trying to figure out. So, let's just quickly update myself on Twitch. I'm just curious how many Twitches I have. Am I twitching online? Twitching very quietly. 23 viewers. That's a new high. Hello everybody. I'm Tom Lees making the Recall Singularity. It's really great you come to watch. I'm just moving this player as I talked about before. Please ask questions in the chat window, wherever that might be. You'll find it. Anyway, so I'm just thinking to myself that I need to go back to Godot. So it just crashed. I'm going to run it again. The Recall Singularity. Here it is. So given this very starry game, I need to figure out what the path is to my player, this little guy, and I'm wondering what show in file system is showing here. So I put it in res 3d ship little guy.tscn. So I'm just going to right click and copy the path, and then I'm going to use this here in Rust. So in my loading code, I've written some code here in Ready that knows how to open scenes. I don't think it's used in Star World Link. I'm pretty sure it's used in Ship Link. So there's try load scene and it puts it in a dictionary. I don't know if I've got a version that you've got a resource loader that opens a singleton. So it just returns a bool and puts it in a dict. And you've got instance scene. Just trying to figure out if I want to make a hash map of these or make them all individual members. Let's just say I want to make a hash map of these entities that we're controlling and instantiating. So right now, if you went back to here, you'll see that each one of the different meshes you see in my ship is being instantiated in this way. Yes, even conveyor corners that I don't currently use, I've had them in the game for a long time, I just haven't bothered to write the code that detects the conveyors. I haven't rewritten that in Rust. When I put those conveyor corners back in, it'll look a lot better. It's something else I should probably look into soon, just to make the screenshots more sane. Okay, so I'm thinking I might want to make a dictionary like this. So let's just make a dictionary of pawn type things in here. I was holding that path on the paste. So so you see, this is me loading a ship scene, or I could just load it manually. I don't like that so much. I'd rather use a hash map, as weird as it might seem, for now, I guess. Yeah. Because it seems cleaner to reuse that code. Or could use an option. Yeah, I was going to keep going using hash maps because I'm just going to use a standard way of doing it. So we're going to create a public enumerator, which is the type of subscenes we want to make in space. So space subscenes, and we've currently got two, which is they're going to be the ship parent, which is the one I just kind of showed you very briefly, and the other one is going to be the player puck. I'm going to call it a puck because it's just slides around the place at the moment. And so here I've got this place where I initialize the whole ship scene. I should be able to replace it with a line from this. So we'll paste that line in here, and it's going to be a type ship parent. So you notice here I say use module draw type. That means I can use the enumerator values here directly. Those are values from this set of possible modules. And so I can do the same thing here. I can say use space subscenes star, and then I can use ship parent here, import that, and then I need to grab this path from here, and without a great deal of loss of functionality I can now delete all this and delete ship scene. As a member, I don't need the ship scene member anymore. Ship scene. And of course everything's going to break horrifically if I get this wrong. That'll be annoying. But I don't have to be too stressed about it because I've committed all my code, and so if I ever need to roll back, I can just do that. So here's where I get the scene. And instead of doing this, I can just say subscenes. I need to make a helper for this as well. I don't think I put a hash map here yet. So we're going to get it from the subscenes. So that'll solve the ship one. So that was just kind of a quick refactor. This here is no longer a variable. It's going to be ship space subscenes ship parent. So I've made it so that it's general in the sense that whenever we're loading another scene, I don't have to add more members here. But what I haven't done is added the one member I do need, which is a hash map. So I am trading some performance. I'm using a hash map here rather than making a member for every possible scene I might want. But this trade-off seems nicer because it will not require me to do so much work to make lots of methods. It's going to make it easier to reuse code a bit more. So scenes is going to use the class default will provide a default value for this. Space subscenes is another enumerator that now requires me to do a whole bunch of different operations with it, so we'll just pop that in. So now Rust will create code on compile that does all these useful things. I don't really need serialize and deserialize for that particular type, so I won't bother. They're for sending it over the network. Okay, so we've got, this was called scenes. So in ready, here we try load scene into scenes. So the other one we needed to load was the player puck, and it had this path that's down here. Ship, and this wasn't the ship root one. That's silly. Yeah, I've lost it now. Oh, well, I thought I copied that one. Godot is still running. I can just find it again. So right click on this guy, copy path. That's the path I want. Put it there, and it's going to load it and put it in my dictionary of scenes under the key player puck. And then further down, when I want to use that, I can do these two lines that will try and find it in the dictionary, which will only be there if it's been loaded. Okay, so if the file's missing, it won't load. And if it finds it, it's going to instantiate it and expect that the root is going to be a spatial node. And then this stuff sets relevant names and so on. That's another point, is actually we might need some way to tell the different players apart. But we don't have to write that right this second. There's a lot of code here that I'm constantly using and reusing and using again by copying and pasting in this bindings. I'm not particularly happy about it. Over time I'm hoping to get better at this and tidying it up. Macros aren't even necessary. Even just simple functions can simplify a lot of the stuff. Move ships, move bipeds. Yeah. It was just occurring to me that if I made a component, you know how I was creating in this mod, not that one, components mod, a GD walkable. If I created a component that had a node path for the current node, like where you could find it, and specify coordinates where it should go, I could create a system that you call every frame that simply moves the transform to the right place, considering where it should go. that I could then share among anything that slides around the place, like ships or players. And it could also have lerping functionality and so on. I'm going to mull over that one a bit more before I go ahead and write it in, though. So, just need to put it in the correct ship. So move bipeds now suddenly needs to have access to self so we can access the list of scenes. I'm not sure if I did actually call it subscenes or if I just called it scenes. I did call it scenes. We'll rename this here subscenes to match the name that I put elsewhere. Like so. That other one just blew up, so it noticed something wrong with the type. Okay, so it's complaining that I passed this enumerator in by value. When you're doing a lookup, you want to pass it in by reference. And in this case, self isn't here, so we're going to say that we need a reference to self to call this function. And that means that move bipeds takes self dot move bipeds, not Star World link. And owner and world, which is dot confirmed. So we're going to pass all those things in to move bipeds. There's something wrong with this. Takes two parameters. Okay, so I've missed something. I've passed in world twice. That's our problem. And this one here, we want to expect a world here, not a lock world. Oh no, it does expect a lock world. So in this case I don't need to say confirmed, I can just pass the world in directly. So lock world is like a wrapper. We've got a wrapper called lock world around our specs world. So the outer one manages the fact that we've got a lockstep model, and then which is for networking, and then the inner one is the actual specs world that's getting updated. And so specifically speaking, this confirmed world is the one that should match the server state to the best of my knowledge. We'll have a predicted one later that goes into the future. And so I don't really like the idea of reaching into this and pulling that out. I need to maintain that abstraction in the longer term, but for now I just want to get things working, so I'm allowing myself to be a bit more lax about maintaining that abstraction. Moving the bipeds. So we're going to try and get it. If it exists, we need to move it to the correct world. So this code here that I just copied across doesn't apply in this particular place. I think I might take that. I might take this and generalize it now. It's starting to really bother me. So we've got this, and the key string, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to say add it, and if it exists, find it. Function add get or add child, and what we want to add or get or add child with. Okay, I've realized this can be generalized. So we've got a function get or add child, and it takes an enumerator E, and it expects a map scenes, which maps E to, there's a hash map, and it maps E. E stands for, I had a good name for E. It was going to be the type of the object, and I had a particular reason. I think it was E for enumerator, or something along those names. But I think it's probably easier just to say K, because that's what we normally say for hash maps. So we need to pass in the hash map that's keyed on K, and with a a hash map that's keyed on K, and its value is a packed scene. So that's how you make things. And then you also need to know a value K, key is K, and then you also need to know an owner, which is going to be a GD native spatial. And then you also need to know GD native spatial child name. And child name is going to be a reference to a string, or it's going to be a Godot string, one of those two. Let's say it's a reference to a string. Okay. And it returns and it needs to know the type of the node it returns, and it returns that node type. Yeah? Yeah, so that node type would often be spatial. The hash map is not mutable, but it is definitely a reference, not value. Thank you for that prompt, weird constructor. Now what we do is we take the code that I just copied, which is these branches here. So you've got the child name, set to name. So up here we call it child name. Might as well just keep calling it key string, because that's what I keep calling it here. So it's going to try and instantiate a scene. It's going to try and cast it to spatial. Then it's going to give it the name that you asked for, and it's going to add it as a child of owner, like so. And then it's going to return the spatial I wonder if I need to put an if statement here, or maybe I just need to say that it's always going to return a spatial and never do the node mapping thing. We'll just say that all my scenes for now are going to be have a spatial parent, and I'm not going to make that an argument, so it returns a spatial. And so it's we're going to try and get, so we're going to use scenes like so, and the key is going to be a reference to a key. I'm going to pass the reference in here, so I'll make it a reference to K. The owner is GD native spatial. That's great. So it creates a spatial and returns its owner. And so if all that works, it returns sum and it returns a spatial. If any of this fails, it returns none. Now, there's an alternative branch. And the alternative branch is something you'd see a lot more elsewhere. I don't think it happens in this class, but it's where we have a look in the world, and we call this find node function like so, and to cast that to spatial. And so that's how one finds a spatial in the scene tree that already exists. So here's how we find it. So let's put a comment here. Attempt find. Find spatial, and if sum spatial is equal to find spatial, and we're trying to get it from string, so if that happens, we can just return sum spatial like so. And it might be easier to say, to simplify this a bit and just say if spatial is sum, spatial dot is sum, if spatial dot is sum, we are going to return spatial. which is already an option, because that's an option is what's returned by the code you see before you. So it's going to look in owner, it's going to find a child node with the name keystring. If that exists, it's going to cast it to a spatial, and if it casts OK to spatial, down here it's going to return that. So node found return. Down here, if let sum scene is equal to scenes.get key, so if we're going to try attempt to make a scene. Now, the scenes.get, the advantage of doing it the way I'm doing it here is that it doesn't try and, yeah. So the best way to solve this problem is actually to pass the if in once. That is create or get packed, which returns a packed scene. So it's an if in once that returns a packed scene. I think that's how you declare an if in once. Let me just go have a quick look at the documentation for if in once. I basically want a little function. It's getting a bit tricky to spot it in my list of potentials here. So we've got, I'm going to look at option because I know that option has a function that does exactly what I want it to emulate. Option has a function that's like or else, and or else calls a function if, where if is an if in once that returns an option of its own, which is exactly what I want. And so the user can create a function that just calls, the user can create a function that just passes on the call to look it up in the key map, or they could do something more intelligent with it, but only do that processing at the right time. So we don't need a k, we need an if, and then down here I'm supposed to say, I'm just copying this other declaration that's on my other screen that you can't see, where if is if in once and it returns an option t. And t isn't what I want a packed scene. So it's an option that returns a packed scene. And I'm supposed to put this where here after this, I think. Oh, in the example they gave, they just put the code up here, which is probably still fine, rather than trying to be all fancy and use a where clause, which is a little bit much for me at the moment. Like this. Why is this not happy? Great, that looks better. Okay. Wow, that white is bright. Okay, get or add child takes a function that returns the packed scene. So we're going to call it that function only if we need to make the scene. We need an owner that's going to be the parent of this node, and a key string that's the name of this node. And this is going to be my little factory function that I'm going to use all the time. So down here, rather than scenes.get with the key, we need to call the function that the user has specified. We don't even need to specify an argument here. If we can cast the return value to a spatial, then we can set its name, add a child, as a child, and return it as a spatial, all ready to go. So get or add child doesn't return a spatial, it returns an option, which could be a spatial, or it could be none. So here it is a spatial, and down here it's none. Great. So could not be created, or it did not have a spatial parent in the scene. attempt to make a scene. So that's like when you go to a party and flip over a table, right? That's when you attempt to make a scene. Anyway, get or add child. So this here, I'm going to move this into my helpers. So I've already got an instance scene function, which is the one that's been called here. So let's put that underneath. And so now whenever I find myself wanting to add a child, so back in Star World Link, we had this point in time where we had an event which wanted to add a child. So here it is here. So we can drastically simplify this now. We can say if let sum, and what the sum is spatial. If let sum spatial equal get or add child, and we need to pass in, first thing is a function parameter that can help us build a new child. Now it seems weird to have that function first in the list of arguments. In my mind it should be around the other way, so I'm going to turn it around the other way. So we're going to get or add child. First thing we want is an owner. Then we want the name of the subnode where it's going to be, which is this name, keystring. Then we want to know how one would create the scene if we couldn't. So we need a function that can calculate, like so, what the packed scene would be, or perhaps return an option. So if all that works, we now have a spatial. It's in the right place with the right name. So in this case, the only thing we have left to do is call this code here. And I can remove this comment because we've already fixed the orientation of ships. It's old. So that code is a little bit cleaner now. Get the name of the new node we want to make. Call our new function. That's all good. And this is not the last time I'm going to be tidying this particular block of code up, because I've got something similar in a number of places. But I don't want to change them all right this second, because I don't want to break everything at once. So we want to use a similar pattern a bit further down where we want to create the player. So we're going to move bipeds. Hold on. But the interesting point here is that we want a full node path in this case. The owner.get node, get child, is kind of for a partial node path. Down here we're saving the entire node path inside GD walkable. Okay. Anyway, that's a bit of blah blah. That might not make sense straight away. Move bipeds. We want to print out the biped. That was for debug reasons. We want to know if we can find it in the GD walkables list. If the child world has not changed, we just need to move it within the current ship. So the ship ID is this key string here. Move ships. Yeah. Just trying to turn over in my head the different possibilities around when we're going to detect and decide to make a walkable versus when are we going to determine that we need to move it from one ship to another. The only time we need to move it from one ship to another is in this particular situation where it existed, and not only did it exist, but the two were different. So we have to look in the old ship first, find it, and then carry it to the new ship. and by doing that we can avoid recreating the scene, which then means that we don't lose whatever's going on with the player, like its particular animation frame. Because what I don't want really to happen is that as a player walks between the docking ramp of from one ship to another, they suddenly jump as they move across that boundary between the two ships as far as the simulation is concerned. So it would be nice if we could persist the same scene as it moves across, and then that scene has whatever internal state and particles and whatever as it goes across. So if we just ignore that problem for now, we could work through it in a pretty straightforward fashion. So the first thing we need to know is where is the ship spatial? So unfortunately, because we're doing functions into Godot, we need to make pretty much all this code unsafe, because the Godot library at the moment that we're using, the Rust Godot library, has a lot of unsafe functions in it, and all the stuff that's doing with nodes is unsafe. Partially because they could vanish at any time if you start making weird scripting decisions in your scripts. I don't see any reason why I need to keep all this code. I think I'm just duplicating. Yeah, I wanted to keep those two lines there, but everything else is a bit confusing. Okay, so here's the flow of our function. We've got an unsafe block that is trying to get hold of the ship spatial that's relevant. So the ship spatial is going to be from the owner. We want to find the node that's the key string. So the key string in this case, why isn't key string defined for this? So I've done something when I moved the ships that caused me to lose track of this key string variable. I'm just going to quick look at this code change here. It's brought up a little diff. That's not helpful. Okay, I might just do a compare on before and after. What I'm trying to recover from GD Starworld link, I'm just trying to recover the code that named the ship. It's like here in update ships, this line of code here. And in fact, now that I think about it, I remember that we moved this key string into get ship spatial. So it's this let ship spatial, get ship spatial. That's what I needed to remember. So there's this ship spatial equals get ship spatial, and I didn't need these two lines anymore. It was confusing me that they were still there, right? So we need to put the same line in here and move biped. So we need to first get the ship spatial, which is based on the world. But in this case, the world is from biped, and that will find the relevant ship's parent node. And then inside the ship's parent node, we need to find the puck. So the puck's name, let's just call it player puck. And we're going to do it a really simple way. So we're going to say let the player puck equal, and we're going to use that function we just created in helper that gets or adds a child. So get or add child, and get or add child takes, once again, an owner, takes the name of a child node. We're going to always call it player puck for now. Later on we might do something like put an entity number on it or something. We might just put the entity number on it now. So the entity number, so I'm going to move this into a format command now. So the player puck ID is equal to format. So the consequence of the current approach that I'm putting in place here is that it's going to this approach is going to create a new player puck as the player moves from one ship to another. It's going to leave behind a puck in the previous ship, which is just going to sit there and do nothing. Later on, we're going to move that from one ship to the other. But for now, I just want to see a player inside a ship. And to get back to that, I'm going to just hack this up real quick so that it's simple, and then we can go back and tidy it up later. So we get or add child. The name of the child is player puck ID. So remember, this takes a ampersand string. I believe if I pass a reference to a regular string, it's going to figure out that it's a downcast to the ampersand string. But if it doesn't, then I'll have to just, use 2ref or 2string. I think it's 2string you use. And we have to remember how to get a packed one. So the way we get a packed one is very easy to copy from up here. This piece of code here is how we generate an instance of a packed scene when we need one. Does it on demand. Looks it up in this dictionary. So we've loaded all the packed scenes into this dictionary earlier, as you recall. Now we need to play a puck. Okay. So this, all things going well, this player puck now will be an option that contains the player puck. So given that we have that, so if sum spatial is equal to player puck, then we're going to forget about the GD walkable problem because I'm not trying to be fancy yet. We're not going to use the GD walkable class yet that I created earlier that we'd use later when I'm trying to track a player across multiple ships. For now, we just need to set the player puck's position and translation to the right place. So we need to figure out what the transform is going to be. I have all this code for translating and rotating, where we create a rotation. So this top one here is exactly what I need to move and transform the spatial. So that code there is going to set, is everything we need to move and set things up to the right places. However, I need to change these numbers. So when we're creating a rotation, we don't want any rotation around X for the player. We want a rotation around Y, which is relative to this thing called biped dot facing. Now I think create rotation, does it use degrees? I can't remember. But we're going to have to, I think it's currently in degrees, is it? Or I don't know, it's just going to spin really fast because we're going to do it in radians for now. So let's have a look at the biped class real quick. Here's the biped class. It has something called facing, which is the orientation. And in Z, oh, my mistake. So I want a vector that's pointing up the y-axis, 0. Now it's pointing up the y-axis. I want to specify a rotation around the y-axis, which is here, specified in degrees. And the angle is going to be biped dot facing. For the translation, so after we've rotated it, then we're going to move it to a specific location, relative to the middle of the ship. And that's done by using biped dot xlock. The player's going to sit at 0 for the y location, and then we're going to say biped dot zlock. That should put it in the right place. Then we're going to tell Godot that's the particular location we want it to be. So we've created a transform for it. And then we're going to apply that transform if we have a spatial. If it's the right spatial, move bipeds. There doesn't seem to be an end to this unsafe. Now, I think there'll be quite a few quite annoying bugs here, like compile bugs. I've done a lot of things that are a bit fast and loose and probably won't compile, so we're just going to see how that goes. Run. Build SG Core. So SG Core, that build is building the game DLL. So what I've got, by the way, in case you're wondering, for my game, is I've got a handy dandy DLL on my desktop. I've got a batch file here. You can see I've got on my cursor just to demonstrate to you game.bat. It's a shortcut. Let me just bring that up real quick. So here's the shortcut details. And if I go to Notepad ++, I should have that open already. I already have the batch file. Forget that title, by the way, that's old now. If we go to the batch file, here's what it does. So first we invoke cargo and we use a particular platform. We have to use that because that's the compiler that can be debugged by Visual Studio. If I decide to debug Godot at the same time, I need to specify what I want to build. I need to specify which project I'm building, and I specify where you can find the manifest. And then if it fails to compile, it will pause. And when the pause is over, it'll go to exit. If there's no error, it will change to the Godot location where I've compiled Godot, and it will launch the specific optimized version of Godot, and it will use this -- path, and it will point to where my project file is. So this bash file first compiles my game code and then immediately launches Godot. So I use this batch file pretty heavily. I've been using it on stream all the time. It's just I haven't shown you the source code for it before. So study hard, folks. And of course you can write a shell script for bash that looks the same as that. If you want some source code for that, I can share it on Discord later. See, I've found that certain targets for Rust work with the C-line debugger. Certain targets work with Visual Studio. Certain targets you can't compile the Godot bindings in. If I want to monitor the performance of my project, I run it inside Godot, and then I use vTune, which is Intel's performance profiling tool, to find any bottlenecks. But the truth is I haven't got any performance problems at all at the moment. Okay. So it's saying that I shouldn't use fn function family traits, and I should say fn foobar to baz instead. So instead of saying fn mute, it does actually want me to say fn mute world to nothing. Hopefully that still compiles. Do I just get rid of the dynamic? Okay, so it seems like this is now okay. It doesn't have a problem with that. So we're going to go to the next one. And so here, let me just make this a bit more friendly with the error window. Here we've got a similar thing, but not in an option. Okay, so simulation I think now passes? No. Sector. We need to specify that new world callback is none. So yeah, my experience Togglebit is that I really enjoy tracking down performance issues and crushing them under my heels. And I've spent probably a total of somewhere about 7 days in my whole programming career getting to actually do that. Because that's about how long it took to crush them. There was a 1 week period where I made like some C# code run about 50 times faster. Actually no, I spent a bit more time doing this than I thought. There's another 1 week period where I made some Python code run about 5,000 times faster. So I don't really find making things run fast hard. The 199. The hard part is convincing people that performance is something worth paying the time for. 201. In the case of the SingStar project, there was a JavaScript decoding that was going on in the carousel. As you rotated the carousel, new song covers would come into view. And if you downloaded a lot of songs off the Sing Store, I'm not sure if they've renamed it since. If you downloaded a lot of songs off the Sing Store, they had little JPEGs that needed decoding as they came up on the carousel. You couldn't possibly store them all in memory. So loading those was really painful, and it was happening on the main. We had to put it on the main thread because we didn't have a sub-thread to decode it. So that would cause a lot of stuttering because decoding a JPEG takes longer than a frame. So I decided that we really had to throw it into a sub-thread, and I did so, and at the time I was kind of considered a more junior programmer on that team. Even though I'd done a lot of programming, it wasn't very difficult to do. I basically made one queue that pushed work into a sub-thread. It's basically a worker approach now. And then that sub-thread would push back decoded JPEGs. And so the communications were very simple and it was really reliable. But I had to steal PS3 development kits off, but basically had other people who were really supportive of the project. So we ran a soak test where the carousel would just rotate continuously in opposite directions and stuff for hours at a time. And I think we found one bug quite quickly, and then didn't find any more. So that was really great, and we managed to get into the final game. So now, if you spin your carousel on a SyncStar, there's no stuttering, and that was great. Nowadays, the tools for that stuff are so easy, especially in Rust. Just no work required at all. Yeah, thank you. It was totally worth it. Expected struct shred world found struct world sync. So new world callback map. So we pass in here a world, and we're not passing in the So I need to say new world dot all those things. And I don't need the mute pointer here. Oh cool, there's a warning here about 2 different versions of the crate shred being used. In the past I've had to try and figure this particular bug out myself. It's been really painful. I didn't have that hint until recently. So we've got 2 versions of shred being used across 2 different pieces of binary. So we've got the SG my simulation code, and we've got the SG core code, and both of them using different versions of shred. So the easiest way I've found to figure this out is to open the log file cargo.lock, which is in the root here, and look for the library in question. So we've got 081 there, and then we've also got shred 093 here. So the next question is, where do we use shred 081? So if we look for shred, and we're going to look in a file mask, we're going to choose toml. So you've got shred 080, 080, and 080. So I always specify it as 080, but whatever library I'm using is now specifying it as 093. So we're going to change all these to use the latest version of that. I believe shred is a library that's used for the multi-threading support in specs, but I'm just concerned I'm going to make the mistake saying that, so we'll see. I can't bother looking it up right now. And also, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's also got amazing, just generally iteration, multi-threading features. In fact, I'll just look it up real quick, just to remind myself what it is, because I'm curious now. So quick look at how many people are watching. Still 27, you guys. Awesome. Nice to see you. Hi, myself in the past. It's like, put my hand up, put it down, put it up. Anyway, that's enough mucking around with the stream. So, it gives you an idea how long the delay is. Oh yes, that's right. It's a piece of code that figures out what parts of specs can be done in parallel. Anyway, so now that I've updated my version of the dependency, it's recompiling. Okay, I think we've moved to the next most exciting phase. It's like Rust is broken into multiple phases. So the first phase is like doing C++ programming. The second phase is like doing complicated reference handling, like preprocessor stuff. And then the third phase is when the borrow checker steps in and tells you, it bashes you in the back of the head, and all the weird Rust problems start showing up. Cannot move out of new world callback, which is behind a shared reference. So there's something about how I'm calling this that's not getting a reference to it. It's moving it into this other function, this map. So I just need to say ref as ref. Yeah, your solution probably might work as well. I'm not sure. But that one seemed to have worked. Thanks for the suggestion, Toggleback. But cannot borrow self as immutable because it's also borrowed as mutable. So it's used here. We're using worlds, and we're inserting get or create world. Yes. Okay, so our problem is that this new world callback needs to be added to this unpacked version of ourselves here. I need to put a comma at the end. And so these three variables get pulled out of the structure and used, and then by doing that, I don't really want them to be. I could even take a reference to self here. Do I need a mutable reference to self? Yeah, reference is what I want. And then down here I don't even say as ref anymore because it is already a reference to an option, I think. No, I do need to keep saying as ref. Okay. We're complaining that we need a mutable reference to self here. Cannot borrow self as mutable. It's also borrowed as immutable. Self.events. Down here. So this variable needs to clearly end in time. But it can't. So we just need to add events to this list of things that are being unpacked. It's a bit ridiculous. This allows us to access multiple members at the same time. It's often done for you automatically. Why can't we borrow it as mutable? It's probably because it already is a mutable reference. Doesn't need to be done twice. Excellent. Okay, let me just tidy up this code a bit. So we've got worlds, ship to space, new world callback, and events. We pull them all out of self individually and then use them all one at a time. Okay, so now we're into the next round of errors. We'll close all these, close all in group, just to make things easier to read. Okay. So we're complaining that we haven't specified the puck ID number, which comes from entities.id. Unresolved import registered GD world components. That was something that GD star components. I see GD floor components and star components. We don't need the floor one, do we? We might as well take it and pass it into sector. Here, ready. Like so. Okay, so in this import, I need to put a comma. Let's fix some warnings. So we don't need space to be mutable. We don't need body to be mutable. We don't need biped to be mutable, which is strange. I guess it's because it's a reference. We're not changing with the reference points, we're just changing the data that it points to. We have a result that needs to be used. So the problem here is that we're trying to send an event and it may not be pushed, we may run out of space, which I think is partially why those walls don't always appear, because I ignore it when that fails. We have colliders here. What's wrong with the colliders? We're inserting stuff here, and sometimes this returns an error when it already existed and has a data that used to be there. We don't really care about that. Again, we're inserting things. We don't care what the old value was. Okay. Get or add child. I'm a very bad person ignoring all those errors. It can't find this. This is, so that implies it would be red if you could import it. So that implies to me that it's not currently exposed from here. Get or add child. So I need to add a public here. So I put pub here. I go back here, it'll go red. I didn't save that. This one. And now that it's red, I can just say import. Cannot find value owner in the scope. So there's something called a ship's parent. We'll use that. Get ship spatial sounds a lot like the get or add ship type thing, doesn't it? I wonder if I should just create a ship on demand when we try and put a biped in a ship that doesn't exist. It might be simpler to just always use that same routine. Get ship spatial. So again, this was in self. So you go self dot get ship spatial, and down here we also need to do that there. Cannot find node path. Well, we don't actually use the node path, so it doesn't matter right now. Can't find node path there. So again, we don't need to pass that in, and we don't need to initialize it, but we do need to initialize child world. And we call that child world. It's such a pleasure to be able to help all of you. I hope that you're finding something inspirational or useful or just entertaining about watching me do this. I really appreciate you watching, so thank you for that. And I hope you continue to do so, and comment, follow on Twitter, join the Discord, make your own games, learn what you can. It's great to have you along. And I'm planning for this to be a free-to-play commercial MMO, so as soon as using ethical microtransactions, which is like a kind way of doing MMOs. That's my current plan anyway. It worked well for Path of Exile. I'm hoping to follow the same path. So I'm hoping you'll all join me when I release an alpha for free that you can play, and you can donate and buy things and make me happy, and pay for further development. I can get lots of beautiful artwork, make things gorgeous and fully featured. I've got very big ideas about where I want it to go. Get or add string. This needs to be take a reference here. Match types. It expects a packed scene, but it found a reference. That's interesting. I would have thought that a reference is good enough, so we're going to go into get or add child. We're going to change it so the packed thing returns a reference to a packed scene, not an actual packed scene. Pardon me. Expected a value, found module self. So we've got a problem here that we need to actually pass ourselves in here now, and move ships. We'll now need to have self.move ships. World is ambiguous. So glob import versus glob import in the same module. This needs to just say specs world. Will that work? Missing a lifetime specifier. So we have an option with a reference to a packed scene, and it can't figure out what the lifetime is of this packed scene. But the lifetime is very, very short. There's nothing else here that requires a lifetime. Could say that it's a static lifetime, but it's actually just like a lifetime A, which stands all by itself. So we've got a function. So we need to put a lifetime A here. Hopefully it doesn't blow up. No method named join. So that's a trait that needs to be imported. Or is it? I think I may have just Yes, I brought an iter tools. That's not the one I wanted. I probably need to use entities res rather than just entities. That should be fixed. Get ship spatial. We can't find a get ship spatial routine. Takes a global world ID. A spatial and a global world ID. Owner. This child world. Is that also a global world ID? Do I need to put a star here? I see the problem is that this get ship spatial function does not need self. Because it doesn't need self, I'm supposed to follow this suggestion here and say star world link colon. Go to some warnings. Okay, system data. So we use the same trick to get entities when we're managing the physics for ships. So, because I can't remember how to do this and I'm getting a bit frustrated by it, let's have a quick look in here and see if I can find what I'm looking for. I mean, I don't think we even need, you probably don't even need to ask for it from the world. It's probably one of those things where we can just ask for it from the join and it figures itself out. I think it's entities res like this and that just works. No, okay. Oh, that's right, we need to say read entities res. Like that. I bet I got that wrong. I need to look this up. Remove the file mask for TomL. So what type does entities have here? Yeah, I just called it entities when I got the system. Yeah, so I am looking for something here called entities. So I don't need anything special here, I just need to say entities. Why is that not working? Oh, it's not entities, I need to say entity with a Y like this. The trait bound integer lucid trig is not not satisfied. Okay, so it's not happy that I'm putting in a rotation that's not actually a float. It's probably not happy with any of those. Yeah, it wants them all to have dot zeros afterwards. That's one of those like annoying bugs. I don't like the way that you have to like specify floats and like with dot zeros. It's just pedantic, but it makes a lot of like nerd sense, but it's still kind of annoying. Biped facing, I need to say to float, which is a routine inside the fixed point maths that we're using. And the same thing's true down here. To float, to float. No method name confirmed found for world. So this world that's been passed in is already of the correct type. See, this dot confirmed is designed for us to pass in a lock world, which we're not doing here, so we don't need it. Lock world is my wrapper for the specs world. Get ship spatial. So it's just saying that I don't need to call self.getShipSpatial, I need to call StarWorldLink.getShipSpatial. Oh, double colon. This returns, I didn't expect a return value. Okay, I see. So I need to say else and then put none here, like this. Oh. I'll just do two else's with two nones. So this none means it did not have a spatial parent in scene, and this none means the scene could not be created. And it might mean that later down the track we want to make these errors like results, which could be a nice way of doing it. But for now, I just, I'm happy with that. So we don't need entities res. GD walkable is not being used, so we'll mark that as unused. Unused variable ship spatial, which is interesting. So we get or add a child. So this get or add child needs to add it to ship spatial, not to owner. Unused variable world. Fair enough. Variable does not need to be mutable. Sector. Okay. I would have thought that changes the sector in here, but hey. Variable does not need to be mutable. Client. Because we don't do anything with it. This variable does not need to be mutable. That client. Okay, when we kill it. That's weird. Oh, it's already mutable. Okay, that makes sense. Variable here doesn't need to be mutable. Which one is it? Owner. So the process doesn't change the owner node itself. Cannot borrow a spatial as mutable because it's not declared as mutable. Okay. So the problem is get or add child doesn't return a mutable. I just put the word mute here, like so. So it returns it by value, so that's how we set it as mutable there. This variable doesn't need to be mutable. Owner. Okay. And now there's a whole bunch of places which do need it as mutable. So the problem is that we need to say this is mutable here because we're changing it. So there's a bunch of places where I guess we copy owner. These objects are basically dumb pointers. They're not even reference counted. So when I moved that logic into a sub function, it just cloned the pointer. So the parent function doesn't need a mutable version, but the child, which is modifying it now, does need a mutable version. Okay, get or add child. So the point here is that ship spatial, it may not have been able to get the ship, and if it couldn't get the ship, we certainly can't add a child to it. So we need an if statement around that. So we'll just say if let. So if we find a ship, well, that's one option. The other option is to actually make the ship when we don't find it. I'm not going to add that right now. Not to here. But that'll be probably a more robust way of approaching things. Oh my god, what's going on? Sector is not mutable. Okay, so all the places where I just removed the word mute, I bet it's going to ask me to put them back in now. Sector is not mutable. What? It's declared as sector up here, mutable up here. I think I must put that in. This is so annoying. It's not mutable. It is mutable. It doesn't need to be mutable. Actually, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. This is an unsafe call. So this still needs an unsafe block here when we're managing this spatial. I wish it didn't. That would be nice. Okay, what did I miss? Oh, I see. I just put the arguments of that that function inside the unsafe block. Fair enough. Call to unsafe function requires an unsafe block owner find node. So this whole function is unsafe. Okay, so the server is still running somewhere, and because it's still running, I can't compile. Of course, I'm trying to compile the client. I need to get rid of the. Do I want to save? I don't think I changed anything, so I'm not going to save anything. I have to quit Godot because Godot's holding the DLL, the Rust DLL, which is kind of annoying. And this is not something that happened when I first started my program. I think it's to do with the multiplayer in my DLL. My multiplayer starts a thread, and I think that because the thread doesn't shut down properly in Godot or something similar, Godot can't drop the DLL when it doesn't need it. And as a result, whenever Godot is open, it's holding the DLL, which is annoying. But I don't think it's Godot's fault. Okay, I see a little guy here in the middle of this chest. Do you see him? I think that little dude could possibly be our dude. When I'm pushing buttons, though, we're not synchronizing to the server. There's something funny going on with that client. Oh, I see. I just realized that the server, the whole time I was showing you that the server wasn't running yet, it was still compiling. That's why I wasn't getting any response. Can you see him turning? I can see him turning. Well, he goes pretty fast. I need to slow him down a bit. Wow, here's one fast dude. So okay. So can you see my little pink dude is moving around? That's pretty exciting. So we need him to rotate a lot slower. Rotate a bit faster and move a lot slower. So we're going to go to we made a system, and that system was the one that was taking the player inputs and applying it to the little guy in memory, the little puck. So I need to go into and then we have to make 2 of them, one for each player. Wouldn't that be cool? But I don't think we're doing that tonight. This is really cool. And then inhabiting and embodying. I don't want to stay up too late tonight, so we'll probably just fix these speeds and then see what else to do to wrap up, like commit and call it a night, guys. I'm really happy with that. Thanks again for dropping by, but I'm not leaving just yet. You can hold on a second. Okay. So to finish off, I'm going to go to the place where I'm modifying. So we've got this entity called the biped, and I created a system that managed the biped. I called it system move biped, and in here we take the lateral x and y and the rotation. So if you've been around for long enough, you'll remember that the x, y, and location are coming from a player input action. So I've already covered this on stream a few times. So we take the inputs on both client and server that the player has sent to server, and on both clients in sync, we put it into this actor input idea, and then from that we can move the biped. So let's make some constants. So we need a move multiplier, and this lateral x is actually a fixed point, a fixed 64. So we're going to use a fixed 64 for this as well. So this is a fixed 64 is equal to fixed 64 cast of 0.1. So we're going to make a move 1/10 as fast for the move multiplier. And for the rotate multiplier, we're going to make a move 10 times as fast. So we're going to say this value times the move multiplier, and this value times the rotate multiplier. And these fixed 64 values are integers scaled by the fixed library, the types that I've defined. But that allows us to use integers in a numbering system rather than floats, which could possibly help. I think I might say new or from float. I just think I say from. That's good. Oh, it is from float. If you end up doing a lot of options where you do nothing in case of none, you can use question mark. That's a really good point. I forgot you could do it with options, not just results. I should start doing that more often. So Togglebit says if you have a pattern where you have nested ifs and you basically have an early exit, in the case of none, you should use question mark for that. Which would be something really useful to use in the GD Starboard link. So in particular, we were starting to get these really nested. Hey Travis, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's nice to have you on board. Awesome. I'm pretty stoked you guys are here. Honestly, I don't feel that special, and so it's nice that people actually care about what I'm trying to tell you. Awesome. Now, where are we? Okay, I was just trying to find that code which we made before that I'm going to put question marks into. Helper mod and load miss from if some else if yeah. Move bipeds can have it. You even return a unit there. Okay, so we'll do that in move bipeds in a minute. I'm just trying to find the one that I made earlier that creates the scenes. So remember the one we creates the scenes? This one here. This one here is a great example for this sort of thing. So what you said was that I can say let scene equal get packed question mark. And so if we don't get one back, we exit early, right? And then we say let spatial equal this dot okay question mark. Okay turns a result into an option, so that will also work. And then we need this unsafe block, so I should be able to get rid of those. I should be able to move all this back to the root level and get rid of all of this, which would be really nice. So let's just right. So that's what the file looked like. Go into commit. We're going to just grab all the work we've done so far and stage it. So now Git has saved the state of the file, and we're going to refactor it to this new approach. And if it turns out to blow up in my face, I'll blame you. I can fix it all. Thanks for pointing out the semicolon. Having fun fixing bugs from your armchair. I hope that's good fun. I mean, there's no red things, so it must work perfectly. Okay, so we have the other problem, which was to do with move bipeds. So in here, we've got this nested ifs again. This actually returns, so what you're saying is we can return an option and not care about what this is. And then we can just say, oh, I have to move all of this into a function to make that work. I want to continue, you see. If it doesn't work, I want to continue. So it's essentially a map. I need to map a subfunction, like a move single biped type bizzo. So what you could do is actually get rid of the for statement. You're a backseat driver, and I don't mind. It's fine with me. So let's just grab this part of the term. Let's grab all of that. Entities.join.map, and we're going to map over entity and biped. So suddenly we're making a function here. We're no longer dealing with a regular for loop. Now this body is a function. We don't need this printout anymore. And we don't really care what the output value is. We're going to say let ship spatial equal this get ship spatial question mark semicolon. And then we need unsafe, those things. And then we can say let mute spatial equal player puck question mark semicolon, and we could give it all those, move that all down, get rid of those two curly braces, and so that's made that a little bit simpler, hopefully, if it compiles. You can't use a question mark inside a closure. Well, if what you say is true, I cry a little bit inside. It doesn't make any nerd sense that they have that restriction. I don't like it. I don't like it. It makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. Well, yes, when you think about it, closure is actually just a function, really. It's just declared a different way. It makes no sense not to have it. You just say, well, it returns an option, and I am very annoyed. Causing constants are limited to constant functions. We're a real pain in your butt. So it's just telling me I have to do this from float. I have to do this from float bizzo. Down below I can't do it in the constant. Unless I use something like once, which just seems like a real waste of an atomic to do that once. So down here I need to cast like this. Try not to think too much about all the very verbose code. This whole fixed thing, I'm still not sold on whether it's worth the trouble. It seemed like a nice idea at the time. So one question to ask myself is, how much do things actually diverge? Well, yes, the question mark operator can only be used in a function that returns result or option, or another type implement standard ops try. You cannot use it in a closure. Yeah. Oh well, it was worth a shot. I need to carry this for it to work. I'm not sure if it's actually any better than the other approach. Now. Is it? Is it not? I don't know. I'm not sold on this being better. Certainly makes this look a little bit cleaner, but I think that down the track I'm going to simplify this anyway by having subfunctions, so it's kind of like splitting one function into two for not much benefit. I don't like it because it just makes things more complicated. I know that's not what you're advocating for, I'm just talking to myself. So we're going to reset this back to pre-refactored. Dink. It's like you never spoke out of turn. Psh, psh, psh. Anyway, don't worry, I don't mind. I'm quite happy to explore new ideas. As you saw, it was minimally painful. It didn't matter at all. It wasn't as bad as trying to port the entire network system to Laminar over two different streams and then saying, actually, Laminar sucks, and go back to the old way of doing networking, which was far more painful. Cannot borrow spatial as mutable because it's not mutable. Make it mutable. Yay, there's no errors. That means the game compiles. I don't even remember what we're doing. I think we're changing scaling. It took a very long time. For some reason, I think we did too much refactoring in there, didn't we? I can't remember what else we did. I feel like we did more than that. The server's still compiling. Just wait for that. There we go. Is it letting us move yet? Okay, so there was a bug where the client started before the server started, and it didn't join up happily, and the ticks didn't synchronize, and stars didn't align, and everything went wrong. So yeah, yay! Look at the little player go. So as you can see, he's moving at the moment on the axis. So here we are moving on one axis. This is me pushing Q and E. Let me just move across here. So I'm pushing Q and E on the keyboard, and he's moving on that axis. It's like his strafe. And then I can rotate with the arrow keys. Now this isn't as nice as the movement that I had before. So this little player puck, I just push the arrow key to the direction I want him to go, basically like an 8 stick, and he'll automatically face the right way. I'm thinking that this is the sort of movement we want to go for. However, this is still a really exciting milestone because we've got Rust logic controlling where the player puck is, doing it in a simulation. Now, you'll notice, if in order for them to stay in sync, I'm going to have to restart this other game because we haven't transmitted the player puck's current location. Talk a bit, you're completely forgiven, I was being facetious. I haven't transmitted the player's starting location, so you see that their relative locations are completely in sync, because their starting location is not. These are still dumping this debug output. I need to get rid of it. Because their starting positions weren't in sync, the players are diverging. Well, not diverging so much as just... Anyway. Let me show you two clients running and it staying in sync. Oh, I meant to quit the server, but I didn't. So I'm running the server again, and now here's a client. Here's the first client, and I'm going to run the second client. So in a later video, so if you've been watching for a while, you would have seen that the one thing I did was I queried for the very first ship that was in the game, and I moved that ship with the cursor keys. And the next thing I did was I queried for the very first player in the scene, and I moved that with cursor keys. So I wonder why it's lagging so much. Something's using up all the CPU power. So one thing I'm going to do soon is allow you to actually move your player, detect that, yeah, it's weird how there's no CPU power. Move your player, detect that there's a console in front of you, push a button to interact with the console, and have the game logic change what you're controlling to be the ship rather than the player. This lagging that you see is happening on my computers too. I don't know why it's got such big gaps in its movement. It's probably something hogging all the CPU power. I'm just pushing Control Delete, and to see if I can. Oh yes, something's using 21% CPU. Godot. Firefox is using a bit. OBS is using some. I don't know why it's hogging so much CPU. It's interesting. Oh, the GPU is being hogged too. The GPU is up at 25% each. Yeah, I don't know why they're running so laggy. That's interesting. So we have the input going. The next thing to do in terms of programming is to allow the player to move to something and interact with that, which is all pretty cool. Is there anything else I want to cover on stream? I think that pretty much covers everything. If you're new to watching me, I seriously suggest, depending on your level of interest, that you have a look at one of the blog articles. I've got a few that you should probably have a look at. I'm just going to show you these and then we're going to go. So if you really don't want to see blog articles, I suggest you vanish now. It's a real pleasure to work with you. So I just wanted to suggest that you guys should have a look at how I use Rust and Godot to explore space, which is kind of an introduction to what we're talking about here. I'll even give you a friend link, which basically means that you don't have to do anything special in Medium or use up your points. That's in the chat now. As you scroll down through this article, you'll find it as a launch off point at the bottom to other stories and also Twitter and Discord. We'd love to see you. The people you've probably seen chatting in chat, they're quite active on the Discord server, and we'll all answer your questions as you build your own game or just seek inspiration or whatever you might do. So it was a real pleasure talking to you tonight. Today's Wednesday. I'll probably do a stream again tomorrow about the same time. And as usual, I'll announce it on Twitter, Discord, and watch people code. So thanks so much for dropping by. That was Tom Lee's streaming about Recall Singularity, the game where you design factories in space inside spaceships. It was a pleasure to stream to you. Good night.